Workday was finally over, and it was time to close up. She was completely exhausted after the long day, having worked non-stop without even taking a lunch break. Myunghan was surprised to see that Hayeon was still at work. They had been working side by side all day without a break, yet Hayeon still looked flawless. Hayeon smiled and thanked her for the compliment. Even though she was worn out, she couldn't allow herself to look unpresentable. Myunghan knew perfectly well that this time would be just like all the others. Had Hayeon really decided to drive herself into the ground again? Hayeon was struggling and completely drained. If she kept pushing herself like this, she wouldn't last much longer. That crazy girl had been obsessively working on the display window for several days straight, and she desperately needed some time to rest. Hayeon thought Myunghan Unni was exaggerating this time. Myunghan asked where she was going and whether she had plans to meet someone. Hayeon said it was time for her to leave. Myunghan agreed and promised to take care of everything herself. It was Valentine's Day, and maybe Hayeon wanted to meet her boyfriend Jaeol. Jaeol was currently in Busan, so they couldn't meet. Myunghan was surprised. It really didn't seem like they were a couple. Hayeon spent more time with her than with her own boyfriend. Hayeon believed that once he came back, everything would go back to normal. You can believe whatever you want, but last year was exactly the same. She really should hurry, or she'd be late. Hayeon said goodbye to Umi, planning to have a nice evening, even if she'd be spending it alone. On the way, she decided to text her boyfriend Jaeon, asking what the weather was like in Busan, since snow had been forecast where she was. Quite some time passed, but he didn't reply, not even opening the message. He must be really busy, Hayeon thought, as she approached the concert hall. A huge banner advertising the famous singer hung at the entrance, and she was happy she'd managed to get tickets and could attend the concert. She knew the concert would be amazing, and he would definitely be upset if he found out she was there alone. But there was nothing she could do. The situation was what it was. She couldn't miss this event. She had dreamed of hearing this singer live for so long. Cha Jae-ul believed his work was more important than dates. He saw no point in wasting his precious time on them. They had been together for a year and a half, yet Hayeon still felt lonely. The higher the expectations, the deeper the disappointment. Still, she needed to stay positive. She was already at the concert, after all. When she entered the hall, she needed to find the seats listed on her tickets. When she finally found them, she noticed a man sitting in Jaeho's seat. Was there some kind of mistake, she wondered, heading over to sort it out. She immediately realized the man was there alone, so she hoped she'd be able to enjoy the concert peacefully. She approached him and apologized, but when he turned around, she was pleasantly surprised. She hadn't expected a surprise like this, especially not seeing this guy sitting in her fiancé's seat. Jinhan oppa. How had he ended up in that exact spot? He recognized Hayeon too, and was genuinely happy to see her. He tried to remember the last time they'd met and realized it had been a long time. She had changed so much since then. Hayeon greeted Jinhan. Had he come here because of Hayeon's invitation as well? That turned out to be true, and he asked why she was at the concert alone. Hayeon replied that even on a day like this, her boyfriend was swamped with work. There was nothing she could do about it. She had to accept that things turned out this way and that she'd be spending the holiday alone. She wanted to ask him the same thing, why he was alone too. Jinhan was currently single and not seeing anyone. Life had worked out in a way that he still hadn't found a partner. The last thing Hayeon had heard about Jinhan was that he had broken off 2 engagements, but no one ever talked about the reasons behind it. Jinhan was glad to see Hayeon. He could spend the evening in her company and enjoy the concert together with her. Hayeon didn't mind having him next to her, but she still felt lonely because her boyfriend wasn't there with her. They hadn't talked in a long time, so for a while, they didn't even know what to say, leaving a heavy silence between them. Since the concert was about to start, he suggested they sit back comfortably and enjoy the singer's performance. Even though she didn't know what to say to Jinhan, she kept glancing his way. She noticed he looked more mature, no longer the teenager she remembered. Judging by his expression, he felt awkward. It was obvious he was a little nervous and afraid to look back at her. According to the tickets, the concert would last almost 2 hours, so they needed to get into a positive mindset. They turned toward each other at the same time, their eyes meeting. For both of them, it was an awkward moment that made their hearts race. Jinhan quickly looked away, but Hayeon kept watching him and noticed the warm, sweet scent of fig lingering around him. She thought to herself how glad she was to have run into Jinhan. He, on the other hand, didn't seem surprised by their meeting at all. Once again, that uncomfortable silence settled between them. She could sense his scent everywhere. Sitting so close to him, Hayeon realized she was starting to feel strangely nervous, her heart beating faster. They were sitting very close, so from time to time their shoulders brushed, both pretending not to notice. Then Hayeon apologized for touching him again, feeling awkward that she might be disturbing his comfort. Jinhan thought she was nudging him because he had been talking too much and distracting her from the concert. But that wasn't the case. Hayeon saw something she couldn't have imagined even in her worst nightmare. And she couldn't believe her eyes. A few rows ahead, she spotted her boyfriend, Cha Jaeol, sitting with another girl. At first, she thought she must have mistaken him for someone else. Around his neck was a scarf just like the one she had recently given him. She decided she needed to call him immediately, to convince herself she was wrong and that she was worrying for nothing. That couldn't be possible. Why would he be here if he was supposed to be in Busan? And that scarf wasn't one of a kind, so Hayeon still hoped she was just mistaken. Jinhan Oppa noticed that Hayeon had been gone for almost 10 minutes, and he was starting to worry. He remembered her saying she'd step out for just a minute and come right back, yet she had been gone far too long. Maybe something had happened, or maybe she'd changed her mind about the concert. But that didn't make sense, since she'd left all her belongings next to him. He picked up her coat and purse and decided to go look for Hayeon. He needed to know what had happened and whether she might need his help. In the crowd, he spotted a girl rushing toward the exit of the concert hall. He immediately went after her. It was obvious she was running away. It was winter outside, bitterly cold. Hayeon stood in the middle of the street in a light dress, shivering from the cold. Jinhan draped his coat over her shoulders and asked what had happened and why she was in such a state. Hayeon couldn't explain anything. She wasn't even sure she'd really seen her boyfriend with another girl. So she said nothing serious had happened, that she must have imagined it. Jinhan didn't believe her explanation. He sensed that something truly serious and painful had happened to her. Hayeon didn't want him to understand how bad she felt, so she pretended everything was fine. She'd just changed her mind and decided to go home. He didn't want to pressure her or interrogate her, so he chose to wait. Eventually, she'd open up on her own. Once again, she noticed a stranger who looked just like her boyfriend passing nearby. When he turned around, Hayeon had no doubts left. It was Cha Jaeol. She stood there, watching him walk away, her legs giving out as nausea hit her, realizing how shamelessly he had deceived her. Hayeon slowly collapsed against Jinhan, and without understanding what was going on, he simply tried to keep her on her feet. He immediately noticed how intently she was staring at that man and asked whether she knew him, whether there was something between them. Hayeon decided to leave. She apologized to Oppa and said she'd go on ahead, promising they'd see each other later. She tried to get away quickly, while Jinhan could still feel her peach-like scent lingering around him. Then he stopped her, holding her hand, and gently asked if she'd forgotten something. Hayeon couldn't think straight. Her mind was elsewhere, so she had no desire to remember anything at all. It was freezing outside, and she needed to cover the exposed parts of her body so she wouldn't get sick. When Jinhan offered to walk her home, she refused, but then remembered she'd forgotten her purse, which was hanging from his shoulder. At a time like this, she could be waiting for a taxi for a long while. Maybe she wanted to do something, Or maybe she'd just stand there feeling miserable. Hayeon wondered if Jinhan had already figured everything out. She didn't know why, but she felt ashamed to look him in the eyes. When he offered to drive her, she didn't refuse. She only asked him to follow the car ahead of them. Jinhan gladly agreed to help Hayeon, telling her to fasten her seatbelt and hold on tight. Jinhye hit the gas, and they took off at a crazy speed. They couldn't lose her boyfriend's car and had to keep following it. The speed was insane, and Hayeon sat in silence, terrified. Jinhan skillfully weaved past cars, one after another, maneuvering effortlessly. They nearly caught up to Jaeil's car, driving side by side. Hayeon didn't even know why she needed this, but she wanted to see where he would stop. She begged Jinhan to slow down, asking if he was trying to get them killed. He reassured her not to worry. After 15 years of driving, he'd never been in an accident. When she glanced at the speedometer, she was shocked. Panic washed over her. The speed was absolutely insane. He caught up to the car, but the closer they got to her boyfriend's vehicle, the more anxious she became. The cars stopped at a traffic light, and finally, they could talk calmly. Jinhan kept his eyes locked on the stranger's car, determined not to lose it from sight. Hayeon apologized to Oppa, feeling like she'd caused him serious trouble. He didn't understand why she was apologizing. Was it because she'd dragged him into her personal mess? But nothing had really happened yet. Still, she could have, if he wanted her to. Hayeon didn't know what to do, so she was grateful Jinhan was by her side. Jinhan had already realized she needed help, and he wasn't about to leave her alone with her pain. Jinhan asked Hayeon once again if she needed help, telling her that if she did, he was ready to do anything to make her feel safe and at ease. He was kind to her for one reason only. Hayeon was the younger sister of his best friend, Ji Sung-won. This situation could easily reach her brother, and she couldn't allow that. She understood perfectly well what the consequences could be, so she had to deal with everything on her own. Why was she hesitating when Jinhan was offering his help without asking for anything in return? She didn't need to be afraid or embarrassed. She just had to take a step forward and trust him. That would be much easier than handling everything by herself. They were already outside the hotel, and Hayeon still couldn't make up her mind. She had no idea what to do. Her head was full of thoughts, and first and foremost, she was thinking about her brother. She didn't want to cause him any unnecessary trouble. Hayeon's boyfriend arrived at the hotel with another woman. He looked like he was on cloud 9, completely unbothered by any guilt over deceiving her. They were clearly having a great time, laughing, relaxing, enjoying each other's company. It was obvious this wasn't their first time together. When Hayeon got a closer look at the girl, she couldn't believe it was Lee Si-ho. She was stunned. Had he completely lost his mind being with her? Jinhan asked Hayeon what she wanted to do. Did she feel like getting out of the car and slapping him across the face? Hayeon was surprised. It was his own hotel. So why was he so calm about it? He understood perfectly well that Hayeon couldn't just watch them like that. It was hurting her deeply. It was painful. She tried to calm Jinhan down, saying they shouldn't do anything and that she needed to keep herself under control. But to him, that was just boring. Hayeon finally gathered the courage to call Jaeil. It was a decisive moment. He might actually answer, even though he had ignored her before. She was curious what he could possibly say in a situation like this, when she was seeing him with another woman right in front of her. She watched Jaeil glance at his phone, but it was obvious he had no intention of answering the call. Hayeon desperately wanted him to pick up, but instead, he slipped his phone into his pocket and kept talking to the girl beside him. She was furious. Seeing it with her own eyes was unbearable. Jaeil didn't even try to explain himself. He simply ignored her calls. Jinhan realized this was the moment to act and suggested they get out of the car and look that scumbag straight in the eye. They needed to find a place where they could watch Jaeil and his new girl without being noticed. Jinhan wanted to suggest grabbing a cup of coffee to wake up a bit, but Hayeon wasn't in the mood and refused. He didn't know how else he could help her. She kept turning down every suggestion he made. Hayeon was sick of everything and wanted to leave. He understood her perfectly, but believed she shouldn't be alone in a state like this. She couldn't watch this any longer and insisted that Jinhan leave her alone. He couldn't do that. Instead, he took her hand and led her to his office. Hayeon hadn't expected something like this from him, but Jinhan decided to do what he thought was right. He told her that he and his staff had checked the guest list and all the suite reservations. The information about her boyfriend had been confirmed. He offered Hayeon a coffee drink, even though it had already gone cold. Hayeon felt deeply embarrassed that Jinhan had accidentally witnessed her boyfriend's betrayal, and that he had to spend his time on her because of it. She apologized to him. Jinhan didn't see anything she needed to apologize for. Besides, he thought she'd already been apologizing all the time, and it was unnecessary. The girl believed she had caused him a lot of trouble, and that was the real issue. She didn't want Jinhan to witness such a humiliating act by her boyfriend, let alone bring her into his office because of it. Jinhan always tried to keep his personal life separate from work, so she felt this was her fault. She wondered if he might get into trouble because she was there. Jinhan knew those people wouldn't say anything, but Hayeon wanted to know what she should do if misunderstandings started to arise. The man said there was no point in worrying about that. The situation had already happened, and nothing could be changed. He explained to Hayeon that rumors about this incident would probably circulate for a while, and she needed to be mentally prepared for that. Hayeon asked Jinhan to let her know immediately if he faced any trouble because of her being there. He couldn't understand why she was more worried about that than about her boyfriend's betrayal. Was she really planning to take all the responsibility on herself and solve his problems for him? She couldn't solve everything, but she might be able to help a little. Still, Jinhan was just joking. She didn't need to worry about any of this. Even so, the real reason and the whole truth lay with her. So Jinhan asked what Hayeon planned to do next. The girl was confused. In that state, she couldn't make any decisions. She didn't even fully understand what had happened, but Jinhan believed she had seen everything with her own eyes. Hayeon didn't know if there was any point in continuing a relationship with someone like Jaeon, especially since she was supposed to marry him this fall. They had been dating for almost a year and a half, yet it felt like she didn't know him at all. She wondered how long he'd been like this. She had no idea what he did when they weren't together. If someone found out, he'd immediately fly from Jeju, dropping his golf plans without hesitation. Hayeon got angry and forbade Jinhan from calling her brother, even though he didn't consider it a big secret at all. Jinhan knew exactly what kind of person Sungwon was. Had she really forgotten that the two of them valued loyalty above all else? No one knew how Sungwon would react when he found out, but it was easy to guess. It wouldn't be calm. After their parents' death, Sungwon tried to fill every void with overprotectiveness. He shielded his younger sister completely and never even allowed himself to think about what he'd do if someone hurt her. Jinhan and Sungwon both worried deeply about her. Hayeon was grateful for that, but she had grown up. She didn't need such constant protection anymore. Even when she was over 40, she would still be a little girl to them. She knew her brother worried about her living alone in Seoul. Hayeon believed she was perfectly capable of taking care of herself. When she said that, Jinhan smiled softly, and she took it as him teasing her, though, in reality, he was just trying to cheer her up. Hayeon thought he probably saw her as foolish, but no matter what, he had to pretend he hadn't seen anything, and make sure not to let a word slip to her brother. Was she really asking him to lie? That wouldn't be easy, since too many people had seen them. Still, Hayeon believed it would be simple. They would just act like they had never even met. If only she had known it would turn out like this, she would never have gotten into that car. It really shouldn't concern him at all. He could do whatever he wanted. After all, It was true that they hadn't seen each other for several years, so today's meeting didn't have to happen at all. Jinhan thought she was extremely emotional right now, which meant she couldn't make rational decisions. In that state, she could make a serious mistake. Did she really think none of this mattered to anyone? He sometimes drove past her workplace, but never went inside, not wanting to disturb her. She really did work in a small space, so running into each other during work would have been very noticeable. Hayeon was genuinely surprised. Had he really known everything? She had never even imagined that was possible. She believed Jinhan had completely forgotten about her existence and never thought her life mattered to him at all. Hayeon could have invited him to get dinner the same way she invited Haein, and if she ever needed anything, he was always ready to help. In that case, Oppa had to promise to keep everything a secret, because if her brother found out, he would be deeply upset. Jinhan didn't want her to think he was capable of such manipulation. It was her problem, and she had to deal with it on her own, even though she understood perfectly well how difficult that would be. Hadn't they come here because she couldn't solve the problem? If so, they could just go and deal with it right now. But no, it couldn't be that simple. If Hayeon went to the hotel now, the entire scandal would be all over the news tomorrow. She wondered whether he would be against such a turn of events, while Jinhan was thinking about what was going on inside her small head. What kind of thoughts were forming there? It was a good thing her brother cared so deeply about his sister. On top of that, he had asked his friend to look after Hayeon if he wasn't around. Ji Seung-won. More than 10 years had passed since Jinhan had promised to fulfill his request, and that promise still weighed on him. Hayeon had to be sure about what she was doing. If the problem wasn't resolved, Seung-won would definitely step in, and then Jinhan would be put in a difficult position. Her brother, Chi Seung-won, worried about her far too much. How was she supposed to get married if he went crazy over it every time? A thought crossed Hayeon's mind. Maybe she should just get revenge. Hurt Jaeil the same way he had hurt her. The idea was intriguing, and Jinhan supported it. It could be her homework, something she had to execute perfectly. And he gave her 1 week to do it. Hayeon's workday started as usual. There was a lot to do, because she always made sure everything around her was perfectly organized. She remembered that the deadline for her homework had expired over the weekend, and she still hadn't done anything. All day long, she waited for Cha Jaeil to reply to her messages. Instead of getting angry, she calmed down after receiving a text saying he was extremely tired and couldn't respond. She was in such a state that all she could do was laugh at the nonsense Cha Jaeil was sending her. But as time passed, Hayeon began to feel deeply hurt. It upset her that he allowed himself to lie to her. She replayed his words in her mind and realized it had all been a lie. He had planned that once they got married, she would quit her job and never work again. Cha Jaeil wanted Hayeon to think about no one but him. A hypocritical bastard who kept cheating on her and still had the nerve to say things like that. Hayeon had completely wasted her time on Cha Jaeil. She had trusted him completely and genuinely cared about him, but the results of her efforts disappeared almost instantly. How could she have ever planned a future with someone like that? And why, at such a turning point in her life, did Jinhan, someone she hadn't seen in a long time, suddenly reappear? It was awful. Just thinking about it made her dizzy. Jinhan Oppa had given her a sense of calm and surrounded her with care. Even though they hadn't seen each other in years, she had dragged him into a dirty mess he knew nothing about. All of this happened because of that sick freak Cha Jaeil. Her friend came to work in a great mood, thinking Hayeon's weekend must have been incredibly steamy. Myunghyun asked whether Hayeon had the perfect Valentine's Day she had dreamed of for so long, teasing her playfully. Hayeon understood her curiosity, but things weren't the way her friend imagined. Her friend was surprised to see that Ms. Ji seemed to be in a gloomy mood. Then she started sharing what had happened to her. She had fallen and hurt herself because she was alone on such a special day. She She asked Hayeon how her date went and wanted to hear every single detail, down to the smallest thing. Hayeon replied that the date never happened. Her friend was shocked, especially since Hayeon had even left work early. Cha Jae-il had texted that he was very busy and couldn't reply, and Hayeon didn't answer him because she was furious. Her friend was stunned by the story and couldn't believe the date never happened, especially since it was supposed to be their anniversary. Hayeon suspected Cha Jae-il was cheating on her. Myunghyun didn't believe it and thought Hayeon was losing her mind. There was no way Cha Jae-il would cheat. He couldn't do something like that. Hayeon explained that she saw everything with her own eyes. Him walking into a hotel with that woman. She was sure the couple looked very happy and that it wasn't their first time together. As it turned out, he had been busy meeting another woman and had lied about his trip to Busan. Her friend was shocked and thought Hayeon was in serious trouble. The whole mess had started right from Monday. She asked how Hayeon confronted him, saying she couldn't just let it go. If she had seen them, she should have grabbed them by the hair. Hayeon said that Cha Jae-il didn't even know she had seen him with that woman near the hotel. Her friend asked whether Hayeon knew who the woman was. Hayeon had to break up with him immediately. No matter the reason, he had no right to treat her like that. Hayeon fully agreed, even though she had been tense since morning and didn't understand why she still wasn't angry. Myunghyun was furious, so Hayeon tried to calm herself. She wanted to look that snake in the eyes, the woman who dared to interfere in their relationship and steal someone else's boyfriend. Their conversation was interrupted by a girl who walked into the shop and greeted them with a smile. She asked what kind of atmosphere this was so early in the morning and whether something had happened since they looked so upset. She turned to Myunghyun and asked if she was feeling unwell. After all, it was Monday. But it was obvious. She assumed Myunghyun was irritated because the girl hadn't been at work the previous week. Hayeon thought that she looked so energetic. Maybe she had really enjoyed spending time with Cha Jae-il. Myunghyun asked the girl why she hadn't been at work, wondering if she had been sick. Lee Si-ho replied that she hadn't felt well at first, but after some good rest, she felt much better. She told Hayeon that she should relax too, since she didn't look great. Hayeon was confused. Was she really worried about her health? She had always had strong immunity and rarely got sick, to the point others even envied her. Hayeon thought the girl was a sly fox when she asked how Hayeon had spent Valentine's Day. Not wanting to show how bad things really were, Hayeon replied that it had been special. A trip around Seoul with Jinhan Ryu, followed by her boyfriend's betrayal, which forced her into making a deal. It truly was unforgettable. But today was Monday, so it was time to start the workday and work hard despite everything. The girl was surprised by Hayeon's answer and didn't understand how she could act like that after everything that had happened. Work was already in full swing in the office building early in the morning. Miss Kim greeted her director, even though she didn't really feel like working. The director smiled and greeted Secretary Kim. She asked whether he enjoyed the Valentine's Day concert. Jinhan Ryu said he loved it and had a lot of fun. The secretary was pleased that everything went well and that he enjoyed himself. Now Secretary Kim was ready to present the schedule for the week that she had prepared in advance. The director listened carefully to all the plans for the week, though his thoughts occasionally drifted elsewhere. Certain things kept him from fully concentrating, even though he knew he had to keep the promise he had made. Hayeon and her problems were constantly on his mind. He wanted to help her, even though he didn't understand why she had refused his offer. He wanted Hayeon to drink something and go home, but she didn't want to. Either way, Jinhan needed to walk her home. It would make him feel much more at ease. Was it her brother who ordered him to do this? Hayeon asked seriously, wanting to know why he was acting this way. Did he really see her as a little child? His thoughts were focused on whether Hayeon had managed to deal with the situation on her own. He hadn't heard anything else from her, just a message saying she had made it home safely. Jinhan Ryu immediately turned to Secretary Kim, who was listening very attentively, even though she could tell his thoughts were far from work. He asked her what she thought the phrase overprotectiveness meant. She didn't understand it all and assumed it was some kind of test, but it wasn't. Personally, she believed that no one should interfere too much in someone else's life. You shouldn't try to bend another person to your own will. It turned out that excessive attention was unacceptable, even though to him it seemed like it didn't affect anything at all. The previous week, a client had visited him, and they had tea together because they hadn't seen each other in a long time due to certain obstacles. Secretary Kim remembered that clearly, but pointed out that it happened after working hours. She also remembered that all weekend long, everyone in the company had been talking about Jinhan Ryu's woman. In the past, no one could just walk into the company like that, and client meetings were strictly limited to working hours. That rule applied even to family members. No one could come in after hours. And on top of that, a company car had even been called for the client. The director asked why Secretary Kim hadn't mentioned this, but she believed she had no right to know about it at all. A meeting of executives was coming up very soon, so it was time to leave. Being late to events like that was unacceptable. Meanwhile, Hayeon thought Myunghyun had been under a lot of stress lately. She had recently conducted job interviews for the company and prepared extensively, but without success. Her body reacted immediately to stress, so she needed to get energy from somewhere, something she had been lacking recently. When she was stressed, she absolutely needed to eat something sweet to help her body recover. Aromatherapy also involved many psychological factors. It might be worth trying that approach and using specific scents that helped strengthen stress resistance. Hayeon tried hard to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the thought of that girl enjoying herself with her boyfriend, and then daring to ask about Hayeon's emotional state. Why was she acting so tense? There was no way she could know that Hayeon had seen her together with Cha Jae-ul. Hayeon pretended everything was fine and put on a cheerful mood, even though deep down it was incredibly hard for her. Lee Si-ho tried to act friendly, even though she knew she was ruining Hayeon's life by dating her boyfriend. That irritated her deeply, because things weren't turning out the way she had expected at all. When Hayeon said that she had spent Valentine's Day wonderfully and that those moments were special in her life, Lee Si-ho began to seriously doubt her words. Cha Jae-ul had spent the entire evening with her, so how could Hayeon have had a special day? She couldn't understand it. Why did Hayeon even think she deserved something special? After waiting for the lunch break, the girl got ready and decided to leave, explaining that she had a scheduled meeting at that time. Hayeon couldn't understand where she suddenly got so much energy from, or whether she had gone to meet Cha Jae-ul. And yes, she had made a decision. The longer she dragged it out, the more pain she would only cause herself. Myunghyun thought Hayeon ancestors had protected her well. But what if she had married a man like that? A breakup was far better than a divorce. That was truly the case. Ending things now was better than dealing with a long, painful divorce after marriage. Hayeon worried about everything while being busy, and there was always support she could only dream of. Polite customer service was their main task and the most important rule that every employee had to follow. That was absolutely true. Today she paid especially close attention to Lee Si-ho's actions and didn't say a single harsh word to her. Hayeon asked her Unli whether Si-ho wasn't actually doing an excellent job. Despite all the concerns, she believed Si-ho handled her work very well. Hayeon couldn't disagree. Maybe that was exactly why Cha Jae-ul liked her. Just looking at her made people want to smile. Still, it was interesting to know whether Si-ho truly loved Cha Jae-ul, or if she was just pretending, trying to take everything that didn't belong to her. If you really thought about it, things were going pretty well for them. They worked together smoothly, Myunghyun developed new products, and Hayeon sold them perfectly. Hayeon believed that without Myunghyun, she wouldn't even be here, and that was a shared belief between them. Hayeon noticed a message from Jinhan Ryu oppa, asking whether she had completed her homework. He was impatiently waiting for Hayeon's reply because he wanted to see her. but he couldn't find any other excuse to meet her. A message from Ji Hayeon finally came through saying she'd finished her homework. The man figured she must have thought long and hard before hitting send. He wondered where his reward was for going along with this little lie. Just then, Secretary Kim informed the director that the marketing department had just called. They reported that Kaifi had refused to continue working with them, which was both strange and unpleasant. Secretary Kim wanted to know what they were going to do next, but Jinhan barely heard her. He was too busy wondering why Hayeon's reply had been so short. Last year, they had successfully opened a hotel on Jeju Island called A Story in the Garden. It was a special project that attracted people through scent. The best workshops and small to mid-sized businesses lined up to take part. It would have been the perfect opportunity for Kaifi. But would they really want to join? Jinhan's thoughts tangled together, and he couldn't focus on a single thing. It was a great chance to solidify their position, Jinhan thought, even as Secretary Kim suggested calling Kaifi again. The director didn't agree. One phone call wouldn't magically solve all their problems. They needed another way out. They had reached the 22nd floor when the director told Secretary he'd handle it personally. They could meet again later for lunch. Secretary Kim stayed by the elevator doors as the director walked away. She called after him that they'd see each other later and wished him a good meal. Jinhan had a meeting scheduled and didn't want to be late. Being late in this situation was unacceptable. He rarely came to this place, but he was always glad to visit, even though he knew the conversation wouldn't be easy. They already saw each other at home almost every weekend, so why go anywhere else? Jinhan asked if she was really unhappy about having the chance to eat with her family. Jinhan Ryu, director of HS Cosmetics and Jinhan's younger sister, didn't think so. She just believed that only their grandfathers still cared about this tradition. Times had changed. How long were they going to keep it up? Right now, they were all busy people with packed schedules, and these meetings felt like a waste of time. Jinhan was surprised to see that he was here too, the chairman of the company, and Jinhan's father. Together, they asked him how his morning meeting had gone. Their father was pleased. The meeting had gone great. Jinhan's brother had done an excellent job, and everyone praised him. He wanted Jinhan to talk in more detail about the Jeju Hotel, especially since he'd mentioned an amazing garden there before. Jinhan confirmed everything and said the opening was planned for June. He intended to make it the island's main attraction and well known beyond it. Their father was satisfied and thought his son had big ambitions. When Jinhan put in full effort, everyone expected major wins from him. He asked if Jinhan really planned to plant a huge number of hydrangeas in the garden. Jinhan did plan to create an open banquet hall and a flower garden, but his father wondered if it was really worth it. Jinhan wanted to make the place famous. Their father had also heard about another project called Scent of a Date and wanted to learn more about it. It would be an event where people chose a partner based on body scent, without considering looks or prior connections. A marketing method based on primal instincts, pheromones. Yoon didn't believe an idea like that could actually work. She asked why Jinhan still hadn't presented a plan for the project and when he intended to do so. He promised it would be soon. Their father didn't object and said that if help was needed, Yoon could be trusted. She worked hard too. Jinhan thought that would be great, but a separate team was already handling the planning, and they were doing an excellent job. Yoon didn't understand what he meant. Had he deliberately assigned a separate team? Everything had to match their brand, but could that team really handle it when they could do better? Jinhan believed it didn't align with her goals or responsibilities. This wasn't the scale she was used to. It was a small company, but with big ambitions. They wanted to give others a chance to succeed. Jinhan believed her company was already successful and didn't need this opportunity. Yoon was shocked that Jinhan could trust unproven companies, especially with that level of responsibility. Jinhan kept thinking about the scent that always lingered around Hayeon. He believed they would definitely achieve their goals and that the hotel would be a success, attracting countless visitors and tourists. His sister asked why he was so confident. Jinhan thought the event would bring something new to the company, something impossible to ignore. Young smiled skeptically. Was that really it? Was that why he was willing to take such a big risk? She knew her brother always liked things done his way. If Young wanted to observe, Jinhan didn't mind. She didn't like that he hadn't offered her a role, and their father tried to calm her down. She shouldn't be angry at her brother, and had to admit she wouldn't win this argument. This was a business that needed constant expansion, not recycled ideas. Yoon repeated that it was their father who told her to get into this business, and now he wouldn't let her take part in the project. It would have been better to give her the entire Jeju hotel, but instead he gave her a company out on the outskirts. Handing everything to Jinhan wasn't smart. Their father couldn't believe his daughter's words. Her brother had achieved his position on his own. So what had she personally accomplished? Yoon was used to having everything handed to her, with others doing the work while she simply benefited. Yoon snapped and told her father that he only drank in the evenings while claiming he had meetings. Did he really think Jinhan had never failed at anything? She said her brother had already failed twice, but never told anyone about it. Their father warned her to be careful with her words. She had no right to humiliate people. Yoon turned to her brother and asked if she was lying. After all, he'd already broken off 2 engagements, and she wanted him to confirm it. Jinhan thought it was happening all over again. He'd broken off those engagements and never once regretted it. Something had always been missing. He suggested discussing the project later, but his father refused. If there was something to say, it had to be said now. He pointed out that Jinhan's actions were provoking his sister to talk this way. Didn't he feel lonely? It had already been 2 years. The eldest son of the family had been engaged twice. Had he really never regretted his choices? His reputation was now at risk. Their father had had enough and decided that in the near future, Jinhan needed to meet a woman and marry her. He waited for his son's answer, but Jinhan stayed silent. Did he enjoy being alone? Or just not have the time? This time, Jinhan promised he'd deal with it, but he couldn't promise it would happen as fast as his father wanted. Their father grew angry, thinking that if he could handle it himself, he wouldn't be talking about it. Maybe Jinhan believed work mattered more than anything. He saw it as his duty to secure a successor. Or was Jinhan planning to get rid of the company altogether? Ryu Yoon asked her father if he could meet with her brother separately to tell him everything, since she didn't have the time. She was too busy. Their father understood that the conversation could wrap up for today, so everyone could go about their own business. Jinhan asked his father if he really intended to leave first, since he still had a few things he wanted to discuss. The man said he'd talk to his son another time, but for now, he had to go. He suggested that his son come home on the weekends, since their mother was curious about how things were going. Jinhan warned his father to be careful on the road. Ryu Yoon grumbled. Did they always have to listen to his nagging? After meeting with their father, she always felt stressed. Jinhan said they should have gotten used to it by now. The father was always irritated. She thought Jinhan was a good son, but she was tired too and was leaving. The man asked if his sister was heading to work or planning to work from home. Yoon said no. She had no more work obligations and was rushing off to spa treatments. It's amazing she hasn't spent all her money yet, Jinhan thought, knowing it wasn't easy to cover her expenses. His sister figured their company was rich, so she could afford it. If she worried her brother too much, he could send her to his hotel in Jeju. He suggested she write a business plan and he'd take a look. She thought people like him always caused a lot of trouble. His head was full of all kinds of clutter, which kept him from thinking clearly. Jinhan wished his sister a safe trip, but didn't understand why she said his head was full of junk. Could it really be true? This was Hayeon Ji's workplace, where she spent a lot of her time. Lee Si-ho heard someone enter the store, so without even looking that way, she apologized and told them they were already closed. When she looked up and saw who it was, she was very surprised. It was Cha Jae. But why was he here? And what was the reason for his visit to their store? The girl didn't know, though she was happy to see him. She approached him carefully and held his hand, trying to figure out the reason for his visit. At first, Lee Si-ho thought he had come for her. But judging by Cha Jae-yeol's expression, she realized immediately that wasn't the case. Holding his hand, she asked Oppa why he was here, but he asked where Hayeon was. Lee Si-ho felt upset. Could it be that he came here just to see Hayeon? Cha Jae-yeol smiled faintly, confirming her suspicion. He asked again where Hayeon was. Had she already gone home? When Lee Si-ho said Hayeon was in the studio, Cha Jae-yeol asked for permission to go see her. Lee Si-ho was extremely upset by Cha Jae-yeol's action and felt angry at him. Hayeon, hearing the conversation in the store, came out of the studio to find out what was going on and who had visited. She was shocked. She didn't expect to see Jae-yeol. At that moment, she didn't even think about how to act around him after everything she had seen with her own eyes. The man hugged Hayeon tightly, and she felt repulsed to touch him, knowing he had embraced another woman. She asked him why he was here and what brought him to the store. Had he returned so quickly from another city? And why hadn't he warned her about his visit? Lee Si-ho felt both uncomfortable and hurt watching Cha Jae-yeol hug Hayeon. Even though he acted as if nothing had happened, it was like he was seeing his girlfriend again after a long separation. Hayeon still tried to figure out what Cha Jae-yeol was doing here. The man explained that he had just popped in after work and wanted to know if she had finished her tasks. Hayeon had already finished work, but she wasn't happy to see him after everything he'd done to their relationship. Si-ho decided to remind her that she had promised to help her with something after work. Had she forgotten about it? Hayeon told Cha Jae-yeol she had a few things left to finish, and only after that would she be free. He agreed to wait for her in the store. She suggested he sit down since he'd have to wait a while, and then she'd quickly get ready so they could leave. Si-ho wanted Hayeon to leave sooner and left her alone with Cha Jae-yeol, at least for a little while. Hayeon understood perfectly that Si-ho wanted to talk with her guy. She was curious to see how they'd behave alone together. Si-ho waited for the man to start explaining what was really going on, since she didn't like how he was acting toward her. Hayeon deliberately said she'd step out of the store for a few minutes to overhear their conversation in her absence. Every time Cha Jae-yeol came to the store, he always found something new to notice. Si-ho was great at arranging things, always putting the latest products on the most visible shelves to attract attention to the new arrivals. Hayeon caught herself thinking she wanted to stab him in the back with a knife. But she couldn't. She thought she was restless, yet she still managed her work well. Hayeon watched them and considered them good actors, trying not to make eye contact so they wouldn't show interest in each other. From another angle, it seemed like they didn't even know each other. Hayeon wondered what Cha Jae-yeol thought coming to their workplace. He was too confident to apologize to her and had lost any sense of shyness, especially if he came just to see Si-ho. Maybe she should wait to see his true face. Then, Hayeon decided to ask how his trip to Busan went. He seemed satisfied with the trip, having met his sunbae. They drank together and had a great talk. Hayeon thought to herself how convincingly he lied about meeting a sunbae who might not even exist. Cha Jae-yeol asked about her brother, but she hadn't been to Jeju, so she had nothing to say. He asked what had stopped her from going since she had planned it for a long time. He assumed she had enjoyed Jeju so much that he didn't call her to avoid interrupting family time. Hayeon explained that something had come up, and she needed to finish some homework. When Jinhan said she only had a week, she thought she had plenty of time, but wanted to finish it as quickly as possible. And this was a good opportunity. Cha Jae-yeol didn't understand what homework she meant, but assumed it was some extra work. Si-ho could no longer watch Cha Jae-yeol's interaction with Hayeon, so she decided to offer him a cup of tea. He asked Si-ho if she had eaten, and when she said no, he said she had been working too hard, and skipping meals was bad for her health. This meant she'd have a late dinner, which would harm her body and keep her from resting well at night. Hayeon listened to their conversation and felt disgusted. Cha Jae-il asked Hayeon if she hadn't forgotten about this Saturday since they had planned to go to the festival together. Hayeon remembered that his mother's 60th birthday was coming up and that they had booked a table at the hotel restaurant 2 months in advance. His mom had been looking forward to it and planned ahead. Lately, they hadn't talked much, which made her sad. Hayeon Ji couldn't even call her. The girl became angry and did not understand why this woman allowed herself to treat her this way. Thinking back, Cheol's mother had been bringing up marriage more frequently recently. It started when they found out that she and her brother had inherited a large fortune after their parents' deaths. Jaeil recalled that his mother said she wanted to have a serious talk with them about marriage this time. Lee Si-ho was so startled by these words that she dropped a bottle of perfume. Hayeon understood why she was so nervous. Si-ho had been in the same position before. Si-ho promised to clean everything quickly, but she was forbidden from doing so because she might accidentally hurt herself. As expected, she tried to clean up herself and cut her hand on broken glass. Hayeon tried to stop her, but she didn't listen. And soon, they saw blood flowing from her hand. Cha Jae-il was very concerned and told Hayeon to quickly bring a first aid kit to treat Shiho's wound. He called her a fool because he didn't understand why she was standing there instead of running to get the kit immediately. He wanted her to follow his orders quickly, but realized there was nothing in the store to treat the wound. He planned to run to the pharmacy while Hayeon watched over Siho. It was clear Cha Jae-il was very anxious, which meant Siho mattered to him. Hayeon didn't feel like helping since Siho was responsible for injuring her own hand. The girl pressed a tissue to her finger to stop the bleeding. Hayeon asked if it hurt and why she was trembling so much. Siho said she was fine and it didn't hurt. Hayeon thought she should be the one trembling with anger because she couldn't control herself anymore. Hayeon went mad when she saw Cha Jae-il running to the pharmacy. This was his true face. But Siho wanted to ask Hayeon if it was true that she and Jae-il were getting married. Hayeon understood why she was so curious and wanted to answer in a way that would really hurt her. Nothing was decided yet, but Hayeon smiled and asked if maybe she wanted to catch the bouquet at the wedding. Then Hayeon clarified that she was joking, but asked why Shiho was so surprised. There was nothing serious about it. Jaeil kept urging her and insisted that they get married as soon as possible. Hayeon wanted to see the girl's reaction, but maybe Cha Jae-il was deceiving both of them for his own purposes. Siho didn't want to answer Hayeon's questions about her situation, so she pretended her hand hurt badly. Hayeon asked if she didn't want to tell her anything, since it seemed their friendship had cooled off. Siho understood what she meant, but pretended not to know. Siho's phone buzzed with a message from Jaeil, telling her to come out quickly because he had told Hayeon he needed to get back to work. The girl wanted to make sure Hayeon hadn't noticed the message from Jaeil. The girls looked at each other and smiled sweetly, but both knew each was hiding something the other didn't need to know. Siho smiled and said she'd been getting a lot of spam messages lately. But Hayeon thought she'd at least have the decency to confess everything to her. Yet looking at her now, Hayeon realized she had been foolish to trust her humanity. It was hard to say, but she mustered the courage and admitted that, actually, on Friday she had been near the hotel and saw someone who looked just like Lee Si-ho. It couldn't have been a coincidence. Siho immediately denied it, saying it couldn't be true. She had been sick and resting that day, unable to move a finger, let alone be near the hotel. When Siho asked who Hayeon had been near the hotel with, she didn't know what to say, fully aware she couldn't tell the truth. Hayeon found it amusing watching her friend fumble and lie convincingly. She understood what game Siho was playing and replied with a slight smile that she had been seeing a friend. "Why, are you interested in who it was?" Siho visibly tensed up and replied that this was not the case at all, because people don't just go to hotels to spend the night. She knew that you could also have dinner in the restaurant there. But in any case, how will Jaeil react to this? Siho nervously fiddled with her necklace. Hayeon smiled. She felt strange because, for some reason, she didn't even feel angry. She just calmly replied that Jaeol was seeing someone else at the time. Then she asked where Siho got such an interesting necklace. Siho explained it was a gift from her boyfriend. Very beautiful, so she never took it off. Jaeol had very good taste, and now Hayeon saw that the couple suited each other perfectly. At that moment, a man entered the store, mentioning the pharmacy was quite far from them. He handed over a bag of medicine and said he'd brought everything. He smelled of tobacco, which meant he had been waiting for Siho to come out to him. Hayeon apologized, but suggested he take care of Siho's hand himself. If she wanted to go home earlier, the store needed to be tidied up. Jaeol carefully treated the girl's wound and tried to cover it with a bandage, but she kept squealing as if it hurt. She asked him to be careful, and he apologized for hurting her. It was such a sweet scene that Hayeon couldn't bear to watch. Jaeol gently blew on Siho's finger to ease her pain. Not every guy would care for someone so attentively. 68. Siho liked that he cared about her and didn't pay any attention to Hayeon wandering around nearby. Hayeon couldn't understand how she hadn't noticed this before, and her heart froze. She felt like such a naive fool. She noticed Siho brushing her leg against the guy under the table. It was very bold. His expression clearly showed he was encouraging Siho to leave the store with him, and he was succeeding even without words. Siho understood him perfectly and used her gaze to ask how they would manage it without Hayeon suspecting anything. Meanwhile, Hayeon approached them and asked if she was bothering them since they were chatting so sweetly together. Jaeol thought Hayeon should have been kind to her friend, not drive her to tears. Sitting in Jaeol's car, Hayeon thought maybe it wasn't the right time to say anything, so she advised him to focus on the road since he looked irritated. The man wondered why she was so cold, since her friend had been hurt. Hayeon was curious too. He had bought a bandage, everything seemed fine, so what was the problem? Why was she so heartless when someone got hurt? Siho was injured and couldn't run the store properly, which meant double the work for Hayeon. The girl didn't think that's what he meant. She said she hadn't noticed before that he could be such a caring. The man was surprised by her sarcasm, but that didn't matter right now. In her opinion, he shouldn't have worried so much when her friend was hurt. Hayeon ignored his words until he said she was acting like a little child, which really annoyed her. Hayeon wanted Jaeol to stop the car immediately, but he told her not to. Despite being tired, he still came to her. This man had grown so bold and lost all sense of decency, daring to make her feel guilty in this situation. He didn't know why Hayeon was so angry, but he shouldn't have reacted so emotionally. Still, he thought anyone would have acted the same. Someone was hurt, and he was the first there, so there was no need to dramatize and make it a huge problem. He noticed Hayeon had been sharp with her words today, so he felt a bit uneasy. He said that she should still call Siho later and ask if she got home safely, since she had left in tears. If he was so worried, why didn't he just call her personally? Hayeon asked. The man started raising his voice again, wondering if she really intended to act this way. She could have ignored it, but she could at least explain what she was unhappy about. Was it because he met with Jungmin last week? But he was innocent in this case, as he couldn't have known he would be there. Hayeon couldn't take the lies anymore, so she told him to stop the car and say nothing more. Sitting in the car, Hayeon noticed a familiar earring in the door pocket. The man kept insisting she talk to him, and finally, she said what was going on. After seeing it, she was completely sure there was nothing left to discuss. He couldn't deny it now. The earring was unique and very beautiful. It was handmade, one of a kind. Hayeon was certain it belonged to Siho, since the girl had recently shown it off. Finally, she gathered the courage to speak, looking him straight in the eyes. She suggested they break up right then, and didn't want to explain the reason. Jaeol didn't understand what she was saying or what had happened to her, but Hayeon thought it was long overdue. Hayeon got out of the car, even though the man told her to get back in. She thanked him for the ride and wished him a safe journey. The man shouted after her to stop, warning she could make a huge mistake in her life with that action. He hadn't expected her to break up with him. Everything had been fine until today, so he wanted an explanation for her decision. He was disappointed and saddened by how things turned out. He had been counting on marrying Hayeon, and his mom was already looking forward to meeting her. Only the devil knows what was going through this girl's mind, but it seemed like she was very angry about something. Cha-jae took out cigarettes from his pocket, but of course, they were gone. Right now, he just wanted to know what exactly Hayeon was upset about. Today, he had to restrain himself since his mom's anniversary was this weekend. He admitted he had miscalculated and been overconfident, losing his guard. From his swearing, it was clear the man was angry because he hadn't expected a breakup with this girl. He didn't even know what to do next, but realized it would be very difficult to mend things with Hayeon, and he had very little time. He looked inside the car and saw the big gift box he had prepared in advance, but never got a chance to give. Jael sent her a message she didn't like. He wrote that he was giving her time to think and weigh everything. Even in this situation, he acted arrogantly, ignoring her feelings. Though the morning was chilly, Hayeon went outside to breathe fresh air after a short nap. Looking at her yard, Hayeon realized she had a lot of work ahead, which she was happy to take on. Even though the trees were bare, they were still beautiful, almost whispering their wonderful stories to her. The weather changed quickly. Bright sunshine, then hiding behind clouds, resting for a while. She didn't want to admit that she felt lonely in this house, and sometimes wished she could turn back time. Looking at her living room, she realized it was empty, with no one to talk to. She remembered the times when the whole family gathered in the living room to discuss family matters. They laughed, joked, and planned their future together. Hayeon never imagined her carefree life with her family could be shattered so quickly. She remembered the day she was told she had to urgently go to Seoul. At that time, she was traveling with friends for her birthday when she learned of her parents' death. Unknown attackers stabbed her parents, and they didn't survive. There was no chance to save them. Their ordinary life was fragile and shattered in an instant. At that time, they didn't realize how hard it would be to rebuild their lives alone. They inherited a building in Sonsedong, where Kipi now stood. The ownership was officially passed to Hayeon. After the funeral, Hayeon couldn't face reality, so she took a leave and underwent psychiatric treatment. After some time, she began to feel better, thanks to aromatherapy, which she had previously been skeptical about. Impulsively, she decided to change her career, trying to escape the world. Hayeon went abroad to study. Meanwhile, Ji Seung-won opened his own wine bar, working as both bartender and manager. He traveled around the world, gathering information to write his own book. Much later, he met Yuwol in Jeju. They got married because they were expecting a baby. Thanks to the parents' support, they wanted for nothing. It was a hard and tragic event. Even though a lot of time had passed, Hayeon still couldn't be happy again. She really wanted to see her mom. She smiled. Was it really her? And why was she constantly spiraling into negativity? She decided it was time for a change. To start fresh, she first needed to clear her mind and tackle cleaning the whole house. The deep cleaning was in full swing. She was getting rid of unnecessary things and purging the house of constant negativity and memories. Using a cleaning vacuum, she meticulously washed the floors so that not a single trace of dirt remained. Then she moved to the yard and decided to get everything in order there. She started by watering the flowers that had long looked wilted and sad. The deep cleaning helped her, and the cleanliness around her made life easier. The yard looked beautiful, but it lacked greenery. Soon spring would come, and everything would feel alive again, as if waking from a long sleep. True, no matter how harsh winter is, it can't last forever. You just have to get through it, and spring will surely arrive. That's exactly what would happen in her life. She just needed to survive this difficult time, and sooner or later, she would be happy again. A little gift from her brother, Chisun-won. She barely ate what he sent last time, and here it was again. She had said many times she couldn't eat so much by herself, but he never listened and kept sending large quantities. She decided to put in the fridge what she could eat immediately. From the rest, she planned to make syrup and marmalade. Myunghan Unni and Haein Unni would be very happy if she treated them to these homemade goodies. She prepared and packed the jars without even realizing it was a bit much, though it looked very nice. Hayeon finally finished everything, but realized she might have overdone it. She wasn't sure what to do next. Maybe she needed to call a courier. The orange juice was very sweet and tasty, so the girl almost always drank only that. She smiled, surprised. Was it really true that he had asked her for this favor? Could this really not be a joke? He wanted her to perform at the opening of his project, History in the Garden. Jinhan confirmed it, but the main thing was that her schedule wouldn't be disrupted. The girl knew she could always adjust her schedule. The man thought she'd gladly agree if he asked nicely. But how could she refuse when Jinhan insisted so much? Besides, it was a new experience for her, one she could enjoy. Jinhan knew perfectly well that Haein wasn't the type of person to use her connections for personal gain. She agreed to perform only because he personally asked her to. Jinhan understood this perfectly and was grateful she didn't refuse him. But first, she needed to figure some things out. She wanted to know why he had bought so much food. Jinhan was surprised. Didn't she like it? But she couldn't wrap her head around how anyone could eat that much. Of course, she always liked treats, especially fragrant pastries, and this place really made them well. Haein was always amazed at how she managed to eat so much at once. It was so delicious, and she couldn't stop until everything was gone. The girl received a call, so she asked Jinhan to wait a few minutes, but he didn't want her to answer it. It was her little sister calling, and she was glad to hear from her. They hadn't spoken in a long time. Jinhan was surprised. Who was this sister who could call her? Someone said he sent Hayeon a package from Jeju, and this time, it was huge again. Thanks to her brother, she could eat properly now. She promised she'd come right over. Jinhan guessed it was Hayeon. He asked if it was really Hayeon on the phone. Yes, it was her. Haein said she made fruit juice and marmalade for her and asked him to give her a ride. Jinhan didn't understand why he had to do it, since she came in her own car. But she had a lot of things and couldn't carry it all herself. She helped him increase bakery sales at his hotel. Could he really treat his VIP clients like that? She had little time, and she handed him the bag saying that Hayeon Ji's generosity was boundless, so maybe he would also be lucky enough to get some sweets. She asked with a laugh, "Can't the almighty executive managing director get away from work for a little while?" Her brother-in-law, the vice president of Jinhan Ryu's company, was always on standby for her sister. Jinhan paused briefly, thinking about how his vice president, Paehan, seemed to be madly in love with his wife. Haein hurried him along, reminding him that she didn't have much time, and the man smiled indulgently, acknowledging that he had no choice in the matter. Meanwhile, at Hayeon Ji's house, drama was about to erupt. Cha Jae-ol was exhausted from comforting Siho almost all night. But he couldn't just leave the situation with Hayeon unresolved. He needed to handle everything to make the wedding with Hayeon happen, since it wasn't in his best interest otherwise. He stood in front of Hayeon's house, waiting for her response. He was ready for a positive conversation and confident he could make it work. He asked her to open the door and speak face to face. Yesterday, he had gotten too angry and pressured her, but today, he admitted his mistake and wanted a chance to apologize. Standing at Hayeon's door, he didn't even notice she was standing beside him, not expecting to see him there. She didn't want to talk to Cha Jae-ol at all, believing she had already made her decision and didn't want to change it. He tried to convince her not to think of it as over, insisting they couldn't just end things like this. He wanted to at least know why she made her decision. She was surprised. Did he really not know why she wanted to break up and never involve herself with him again? Cha-jae thought maybe Hayeon had figured him and Siho out. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been so cold. He had to make sure not to reveal anything. No matter how much he thought, he couldn't understand the reason. But she believed there was nothing to figure out. Just accept it as it was. She had already made up her mind, so there was nothing left to do. Their relationship couldn't be restored. If he still didn't know the reason for the breakup, she had nothing more to say. He could leave, but he wanted her to wait a minute longer to apologize one more time. Hayeon didn't need his apology. She had made up her mind, though she could reflect on some points. When she stopped, Cha-jae thought it had worked and that she might forgive him. At that moment, she thought if he were really reflecting on what he'd done, they wouldn't be talking. He couldn't be that shameless. He said he hadn't slept all night and asked for one last chance. Hayeon smiled and decided to ask if he deserved forgiveness. Because of Siho, he hadn't slept at all today, but he had to somehow make Hayeon reconsider. So what could Jaeil offer her today? She asked him. He was surprised. Was she proposing a deal? It wasn't a deal. She just hadn't heard the answer to her question. Honestly, she could have pretended to be naive and ignored it all, but she no longer wanted to and couldn't trust him. Was there any point in continuing the relationship if there was no trust or love? Cha-jae realized she knew everything about his betrayals. He was lost and didn't know what to do next. Denying it was pointless. He decided to confess everything to Hayeon, explaining it was the biggest mistake of his life and he deeply regretted it. Hayeon thought he should take a course for cheating men, where they could teach him to come up with more original stories than his. He said everyone has the right to make mistakes, but in such cases, she should pretend it's fine and ignore it. But she could act like him too. Anything can happen in life, and she didn't think he'd like that. He didn't understand why she said that. It wasn't true. He had thought it all through and decided to marry Hayeon. Unexpectedly, Hayeon asked for his phone. When he asked why, she said nothing. She unlocked it and accessed the contacts to see who he'd been calling frequently. When she opened the contacts, everything was exactly as she expected. Hayeon decided to call the number, and as she expected, Siho answered. Siho cheerfully replied, "Hi, honey." Hayeon cheerfully replied, "Hi, honey. Jaeil just said you were a mistake." She told Siho that Cha-jae was standing outside her house, apologizing and admitting he had made a big mistake. The man sharply grabbed his phone back from Hayeon and asked why she did that. But she asked if you really didn't want her to. He tried to end the conversation with Siho so she wouldn't overhear them. He said she could hit him in the face as many times as she wanted if it made her feel better. When Hayeon asked him why he thought it would be easier for her, or that she was going to do something like that, the man replied that they would get married anyway. If she wanted him to take full responsibility, he promised he would always take care of her. Jaeil couldn't let all his efforts go to waste. He couldn't say he didn't love Hayeon. It was just that his desires had gotten the better of him at some point. He chose her because she was more suitable as a wife than Siho, and now they could part ways. That could never happen, though, because his mother was expecting a celebration for her anniversary. Could it be that Cha-jae still didn't understand what had happened and dared to blame her for everything? The man suggested that Hayeon hit him again and again, finally settling all the issues between them. But Hayeon wanted him to go to Siho and let her be. He asked Hayeon to at least keep her promise and come to his mother's anniversary this weekend. The request sounded strange coming from him, as Cha-jae might have had an ulterior motive. He handed Hayeon a gift bag and wanted her to give it to his mother, claiming that there is a gift that she will definitely like. Hayeon didn't understand. Was this gift not for her? It wasn't even an apology, but a present for his mother's anniversary. She wanted to swing the gift bag at Cha-jae, but heard a voice behind her that stopped her. Hayeon asked Hayeon what was going on and why she was shouting so loudly it could be heard down the street. When Hayeon turned, she saw Ju Hain, who had come at her request. Hayeon didn't want her friend to witness these shameful arguments with Cha Jaeol. Hayeon felt embarrassed in front of Haein that things had come to this, humiliating her dignity. She wanted to leave quickly and not continue the conversation with Cha Jaeol in Ju Haein's presence, who could sometimes be sharp in her words. Hayeon looked at the car the girl arrived in and realized she hadn't come alone. She saw Jinhan get out of the car, also heading toward them. The situation made her want to sink through the ground from embarrassment. Hayeon wondered what Jinhan Ryu was doing there. She had only invited Haein. Why hadn't they told her they would come together? Why had he decided to visit her? Maybe he was just accompanying Ju Haein, or perhaps he had some business nearby. Hayeon prepared her favorite dish, and when the guests entered her house, they were greeted by that incredible aroma. When Jinhan asked why she wasn't at work, she said it was her day off. Ju Haein wondered why she was sitting at home when the weather outside was so nice. Ju Haein recalled the situation with Cha Jaeol outside and was curious about what had really happened. Why did Cha Jaeol run off as soon as he saw them? But it didn't matter. She never liked him anyway. To Jo Haein, that guy was always hard to understand and didn't act properly toward her friend. They thought it was better to focus on something productive than to dwell on sadness. Tu Haein asked Hayeon and poured her a drink. Hayeon noticed Jinhan standing, so she suggested he sit on the couch and finally relax. She asked what they wanted to drink. Ju Haein heard that Hayeon had made amazing fruit juice, so maybe she could serve that. Then she asked Jinhan if he'd tried Hayeon's juice yet. Hayeon wanted to mention that the juice would taste even better if it sat for a few days. Her brother had sent a lot of green tea, which she could offer them, since it had way more caffeine than the juice. Her sister immediately agreed to drink the green tea, and Jinhan didn't refuse either. Since the last meeting with Hayeon, Jinhan had been thinking about her constantly. The continuation of the project was a great opportunity for her, but she had declined. So he wanted to see her and find out why. He hadn't expected to see her so soon. Jinhan looked at her and realized she was very upset. He guessed the reason had to do with Cha Jaeol, who had betrayed her. It was noticeable that she sometimes drifted into her thoughts, not even hearing what the guests were asking. Jinhan didn't take his eyes off Hayeon, confident that she would share her problems with them when ready. But she didn't want to do it in front of her friend, feeling embarrassed about being betrayed by her boyfriend. She had prepared the green tea to her guests, sure they'd like it because it was very flavorful. She was just doing what needed to be done, and Jinhan completely understood. He was glad she held herself together and didn't despair. She asked if the guests were hungry, but they had eaten a few hours ago, so they agreed to have some fruit. Hayeon checked the clock. It was already 3 p.m., and she hadn't eaten anything yet. Jinhan said she shouldn't skip meals. Breakfast was important. But when she was busy, she sometimes even missed lunch. Hayeon liked that Jinhan cared about her and asked if she had eaten anything today. Until now, only her brother had looked after her. Hayeon didn't know Jinhan would come, and she had nothing to offer him. So she suggested fruit. Jinhan remembered how her mother had also served him fruit and made rice cakes and cookies. Could it be that Hayeon still used her mother's plates? Jo Haein asked the girl if she had broken up with Cha Jaeon, but Hayeon didn't want to talk about it now. Honestly, she never liked her boyfriend from the start. He acted like some charming prince, and finally, he revealed his true face. Her friend tried to explain to Jinhan that the guy they had seen outside Hayeon's house was her boyfriend, but he was just a piece of trash. Jo Haein had long asked Hayeon Ji to get rid of him, knowing he wasn't right for her. Hayeon didn't want to talk about Cha Jaeol or her personal life anymore. Ultimately, why bring it up in front of Oppa? She knew Hayeon was very angry about it. Jinhan thought he understood everything, since he had witnessed what happened. He gave her a week to sort things out and make the right decision. Hayeon usually liked to lecture her, but today Hayeon wanted to know about her friend's relationship with her boyfriend. Hayeon replied that they were like a married couple who had lived together for almost 30 years. In a year, she would throw the bouquet to Hayeon. Of course, it was possible Hayeon would get married first. That was entirely likely. Jinhan thought the girl was telling the truth. She could very well get married before Ju Hae-in. No one had the right to treat Hayeon poorly, because Ju Hae-in cared for her like a younger sister. Jinhan was proud of her. She had successfully completed her homework and managed everything on her own. Hayeon asked Oppa if it was time for him to go back to work, but he said he was working outside the office. Hayeon didn't understand what it meant to work outside the office. Ju Hae-in explained she had kidnapped Jinhan to help her. Jinhan realized he would need to return to work soon, but Ju Hae-in said it was good to take breaks sometimes. Thanks to her, he had a nice rest. Jo Hae-in didn't understand why he was looking at her like that and wanted Hayeon to notice too. Hayeon realized Jinhan was kind to everyone. He seemed like the most noble person she had ever known. He wanted to help her when she was in a tough situation, but at her request, let her solve the problem herself. Jo Hae-in suggested that when they had free time, they could go to Jeju or somewhere else to have some fun. She had long dreamed of seeing spring there and knew a great restaurant that served sea urchins. Jinhan asked if maybe she wanted him to make a reservation for her at the resort. Ju Hae-in was thrilled by Oppa's offer because she really wanted a private villa with a big pool. She immediately asked Hayeon if she wanted to go with her, since she had heard that Oppa would rent the villa. Although Jinhan thought Hayeon could have asked Taehan to do it, around Taehan, she tried to be polite and talk more to her brother-in-law, who had been very busy lately. But she couldn't keep asking her brother-in-law to fulfill her every whim. After all, she had to have a conscience. Ju Hae-in was offended that Hayeon could say such things about her. Finally, the three of them were able to meet and chat about various topics. Haein still remembered that Hayeon liked Jinhan. She didn't want the girl to share all the details she had confided in her. Of course, these feelings had started back in middle school, so it could be called a childhood love. Although Jinhan clearly remembered her confession to him. By the way, Jinhan had told her back then that she should date someone her own age, and bought her some strawberry milk. That was true. It happened when Hayeon was finishing middle school. He had said he appreciated her confession, but she should date guys her own age. He also got along well with her brother and considered Hayeon like a younger sister, since he had watched her grow up. He thought Hayeon was too young to have such strong feelings for him, understanding well what it meant to have a crush at that age. That was exactly how it was, Jinhan asked Hayeon. But now she denied it because she didn't want to admit she had been in love with him. Jinhan kept glancing around the house. He liked interiors with minimalist simplicity. Hayeon noticed his interest in her home's design, so she suggested he look around the whole house. The man thought it might be inconvenient, but happily agreed. Jo Hae-in said they could leave, while she would lie down and rest for a bit. Jinhan looked around and said that even though a lot had changed since Sungwon used to live here, the house still felt warm and cozy. They stepped into a large room filled with work tools and an enormous number of jars containing different oils. Hayeon explained that this was her workspace. It used to be Sungwon's game room, but he took everything with him when he moved to Jeju, so she decided to set it up for herself. Jinhan studied the space where Hayeon created her fragrances with genuine interest, when suddenly, his attention was caught by a set of numbered jars. He reached for one of them. Hayeon immediately said they were just failed samples, but to him, the scent was far too good to be considered a failure. Hayeon held out her wrist and suggested he evaluate the final version instead. Jinhan leaned in and closed his eyes to better identify the scent. He inhaled slowly and quietly said that it was a little different from what he had smelled the last time they met. He continued to hover near her wrist, breathing it in as if savoring the fragrance, thinking to himself that he still caught that sweet peach note from before. Only this time, it felt fresher. Hayeon froze at the unexpected sight in front of her. The moment felt far too intimate. Her heart started racing, and she felt her cheeks flush. Hayeon suddenly realized something. Was this room always this small? There was no one here except her and Jinhan oppa. He held on to Hayeon's hand for a long time, so she assumed he was just trying to figure out the scent and that she should calm down. But for some reason, she suddenly felt suffocated, and it made her uncomfortable. Hayeon tried to speak to him, wanting him to listen, but Jinhan beat her to it and asked what was hidden in this fragrance. Hayeon immediately answered that it was Turkish rose, with just a hint of bergamot and fresh mint. He really liked the scent. It was pleasant, like walking through a blooming garden. He imagined a gentle breeze flowing through a sunlit garden in full bloom. It was a scent you could enjoy forever. Hayeon looked at Jinhan with curiosity, because he was the only one who truly appreciated her talent for creating beautiful fragrances. She explained that she had attended a rose festival in France while studying perfumery, and she wanted to preserve those memories. That's why she created this unique fragrance, to remind her of the French garden she used to walk through on warm evenings. When she traveled, she always paid attention to things like the air, temperature, and humidity. She wanted to preserve those exact feelings and recreate the sense of the places she had been. Jinhan was surprised. It was the first time he had heard of capturing places through scent, so he asked how she did it. He looked at Hayeon carefully, and after a long pause, said that he was becoming greedy. Hayeon was confused. She didn't understand what he meant. Why was he suddenly speaking in riddles she had never heard before? Jinhan didn't explain anything further. He just silently looked at her, even though he could tell she felt uncomfortable. Unable to handle his gaze, Hayeon lowered her eyes to avoid meeting his. Ju-hae called out to Jinhan, saying it was time for them to leave. She had things to do, and he needed to get to work. Hayeon asked Ju-hae to wait because she wanted to treat her to some blueberry jam and even give her a few jars to take home. Jinhan didn't rush to leave Hayeon's house. He didn't feel like going to work at all. Spending time with her was much more pleasant. He seemed almost enchanted. For some reason, he couldn't forget the scent he had felt from Hayeon. The day came when Hayeon had to attend Chajaeor's mother's anniversary. She didn't want to go at all, and even the weather matched her mood. Surrounded by all those people, she felt uncomfortable, so she stayed quiet, simply observing the guests and listening to their conversations. Chajaeol acted as if everything between them was fine, like nothing had happened. Still, he avoided eye contact with Hayeon so he wouldn't trigger her emotions. He had been visiting her every day, begging her to help him. His mother had high expectations for this anniversary. Turning 60 only happens once, and he didn't want to ruin it because of their problems. Hayeon didn't come because of his persistence, but because she wanted to figure everything out. His mother spoke to her son, mentioning how difficult it was to book this place. Jae didn't see it as a problem. His mother was turning 60, so of course everything had to be perfect. She noted how attentive he was, saying he was the only one who truly understood her feelings. Even though she seemed pleased with the celebration, when she looked at Hayeon, there was something hidden in her gaze. She practically burned Hayeon with her stare, but Hayeon tried to ignore it and focus on others. His mother asked if she liked the food, saying she looked upset. Hayeon replied that everything was delicious and she shouldn't worry. The mother told her to stop picking at her food and talk instead. She had been silent the whole time. Jae tried to explain, but she ignored him. They hadn't seen each other in a while, so why wasn't Hayeon talking? She always had that expression every time they met. She mentioned her friend's son had recently gotten married, and his wife was very sweet and attractive. They visited her every weekend, and their relationship was like mother and daughter. She wondered why she wasn't as lucky. Jae explained that Hayeon was usually quiet. Since when did she dislike quiet people? His mother believed women should be modest with elders, but within reason. They asked about her necklace, knowing it was a limited edition and hard to get. Was it a gift from her oppa? Hayeon had long felt their eyes fixed on the necklace. His mother wondered if it was really worth spending a lawyer's salary on it. Hayeon thought she would have preferred receiving an expensive bag, then said she'd bought it with her own money. The woman didn't care about her answer. She said it was disgraceful to demand gifts when a lawyer's salary couldn't cover all expenses, and no matter how much a woman earned, it wasn't something to brag about. What would others think if she spent money so recklessly? Jaeil's sister said not to worry. Her brother earned well. She even joked about quitting school and going into business like her brother, wondering why she worked so hard studying when she was already in her 3rd year with no results. She wondered if it was really that hard to sell inheritance and become rich. The mother didn't understand how she could compare government work to business. Watching them, Hayeon couldn't believe she once tried to build a relationship with this family. She used to feel afraid, thinking her lack of parents was her weakness. But now, it just seemed ridiculous. Jaeil said he needed to go to the restroom, leaving her alone with his mother and sister during this tense moment. As soon as he left, his mother began speaking rudely and without respect, asking if Hayeon had discussed their previous conversation with her brother. She suggested setting up an office for Jaeil in her brother's house to save on rent. Hayeon thought about it, but to her, the idea sounded completely absurd. The mother got irritated, not understanding why Hayeon found her suggestion unreasonable, since her brother had moved to Jeju anyway. He rarely came to Seoul, and Hayeon already had her own workspace, so she should convince her brother to give up the house. Hayeon was fed up. How could she ask for something like that so openly? The mother got offended, accusing Hayeon of being rude, while acting the same way herself, yet thinking she was educated and cultured. Hayeon reminded her that their parents left the house to them so they wouldn't lack anything. She couldn't make decisions alone or force her brother into anything, and she wouldn't. The mother argued that if Jaeil did well, she would too. Why should he work for others his whole life when he could run his own company? She criticized Hayeon for living comfortably in her brother's house, while Jaeil had to work hard. Once they got married, everything would be shared anyway. She even asked if Hayeon was offended by her words and whether she wasn't ashamed to behave like that in front of her future mother-in-law. Her daughter tried to stop her, but she ignored it. The mother told her daughter not to interfere if she didn't fully understand the situation. She ordered Hayeon to discuss the matter with her brother again, questioning why she stayed silent. When adults spoke to her, she had no right to show dissatisfaction. The woman raised her voice, saying Hayeon's parents clearly hadn't taught her properly. If she wanted to join their family, she would have to learn all their traditions. The father tried to stop her, saying she was behaving inappropriately, but she pushed him away and told him not to interfere. After a while, Jaeil returned, but the festive atmosphere at the table was gone. He asked what was going on, wondering if they came to argue instead of celebrating. His mother said nothing had happened. Hayeon had just been silent the whole time. She pretended to be hurt, saying she felt upset talking to herself because of Hayeon's silence. Then they heard a voice behind them. A girl announced her arrival. Jaeil was the most surprised, since it was meant to be a surprise for him. He didn't understand why she did it, because things could end badly for her. Hayeon was actually relieved. Now all the attention could shift from her to this poor girl. It was Lee Si-ho, smiling, completely unaware of what kind of family she was stepping into. Hayeon turned to Jaeil's mother and said she came here today to say something, but because of her pointless talk, she couldn't do it. She knew this news would shock everyone, so she couldn't bring herself to say it before. But now was the moment. She said that she and Jaeil had been over for a while. His mother couldn't believe it and thought Hayeon was just trying to get back at her. Today was supposed to be a happy day, and now she would never see this girl again. Hayeon decided to introduce them to her friend, the girl their son had been seeing for a long time. It was Lee Si-ho. The girl smiled sweetly at his mother and congratulated her again on her anniversary, saying the celebration was truly wonderful. His mother turned to her son, clearly unhappy with what Hayeon was saying, and asked who that girl sitting next to him was. The woman tried to stop Hayeon, but it was pointless. Hayeon had no desire to stay there anymore, realizing she didn't belong. After his workout, Jinhan took a shower, and now it was finally time for him to relax with a cup of tea. But what he saw made him change his plans. The tea could wait. He saw Hayeon walking out of the restaurant, with Jael running after her, trying to stop her. He didn't expect to see her today, but noticing she was in trouble, he wanted to find out what had happened. Jael grabbed her by the hand, asking why she was doing this and why Siho had come to the restaurant. He said it wasn't a reason to act like this. Why was she making things more complicated? Hayeon explained she just wanted to figure everything out. He said she could go back inside and explain everything to his mother herself, though he knew it wouldn't be easy. It might drive him crazy. Jinhan watched Hayeon and noticed her expression was completely different now, not the same one he saw at her house earlier. Jael questioned why she came at all if she was going to act like this. She shouldn't have come in the first place. He reminded her that he had been begging her to come to his mother's anniversary. Had she really broken her promise? It was the perfect chance to explain everything to his family. Jinhan thought this was the decisive moment for Hayeon. It was time to finally end this. Taeil wanted her to listen, but she kept interrupting him. Hayeon told him Siho was left alone inside. Shouldn't he go back to her? Jinhan realized that this guy had cheated on her. Jael was furious. Everything he had planned fell apart in just a few minutes. Out of frustration, he slammed his fist hard against the wall. He might lose control and hurt Hayeon. Jinhan was worried he might hit her, but Hayeon told him she wasn't afraid of him at all, so he shouldn't even try to intimidate her. She said his behavior was ridiculous. He blamed her for everything, even though he caused it all himself. Jinhan admired her strength. She was a real fighter, standing up for her dignity. But in his mind, he warned himself that if that bastard tried to scare her again, he would destroy him. Hayeon explained that the reason she cared so much about their relationship ending was because he had been her choice. She wanted to prove to herself she hadn't made a mistake. But she was wrong, and she regretted choosing him. Jael asked if she didn't think this was too much for such an important day. She should think about his mother. Considering everything, they should go back and apologize. His mother saw Hayeon as her own daughter, so she should show respect. Hayeon thought that was ridiculous. He hadn't heard what his mother said behind his back. She constantly judged her and looked for flaws. So should she really apologize when that woman demanded an office and even a house before the wedding? Chael was confused. Could his mother really say something like that? Hayeon confirmed she had said it repeatedly. He insisted it must be a misunderstanding. His mother would never do that. That made Hayeon angry, and she said they were both hypocrites. Hayeon said that woman was his mother, but to her, she was no one. So he shouldn't come to her anymore. The conversation was over. She was exhausted and wanted to go home, while he should go back and continue celebrating his mother's anniversary. Hayeon turned to leave, but then noticed Jinhan standing behind her. He might have heard everything. She was surprised to see him and didn't understand how he ended up there at that moment. She felt embarrassed and didn't know how she could explain all this to him. It didn't even make sense herself. Jinhan asked why she stayed at the restaurant so long, when she said it would only take 5 minutes. Hayeon didn't understand what he meant at first, so she stayed silent. Jael angrily asked who he was and what he wanted. Jinhan replied he could ask him the same. Who was he, and why was he raising his voice at Hayeon? Jaeon said he was the man who would soon become her husband. Hayeon thought he couldn't be serious. Apparently, he hadn't learned anything last time, even though Jinhan shouldn't interfere. This whole situation was insane. But when Jinhan asked her if it was true, she said no. Jinhan told Jaeod that she clearly didn't feel the same. How could he force a woman to marry him if she didn't want to? Was he that desperate? When Jinhan addressed him as Lawyer Cha Jaeol, he was surprised. Did he know him? Maybe he had been his client, or was also a lawyer. He felt like he had seen him somewhere before. Jinhan handed him his business card, and then Jael realized who he was. He was the CEO of a hotel, the same man he had seen near Hayeon's house. Chael apologized, saying he didn't know who he was. He added that he had a lot to do and needed to leave. Jinhan pointed at the wall and said there was a lot of dust after he hit it, so something should be done about it. Chael didn't understand what he meant. Was he just trying to mock him? Jinhan smiled and said there was a lot of dust in the air, so he should hurry. It wasn't good to breathe polluted air. That was enough. Jinhan and Hayeon needed to leave, so if there was nothing else, they could say goodbye. But he gave him one warning. If other guests complained, they would have to call security. Chael didn't understand where he came from or why he was threatening him. The CEO and Hayeon, what kind of relationship did they have? He couldn't figure out how Hayeon even met him. Maybe they were already involved while she was still with him. Maybe she cheated too. But whatever their relationship was, it wasn't his business anymore. He shouldn't create more conflict or get involved. A woman who came out of the restaurant called out to him, telling him to hurry. His mother had caused a scene. Then she asked who that woman was, wondering if he had been seeing her at the hotel. Chael asked what happened, but didn't want to explain anything to her. His mother was on the verge of fainting. Why the hell was she even here if she had already left them? It was time. If anything happened, there was medical staff nearby for emergencies. Chael thanked him for the information. The woman kept asking who that man was and what they talked about. Chael, irritated, told her to shut up. Hayeon asked Jinhan what that was and why he suddenly showed up. He acted like he didn't understand what she meant. He said it was his property, his building, so of course he would be there. But then he realized that wasn't what she meant. She smiled, saying it didn't matter anymore. Still, she wondered why he always appeared at such inconvenient moments. He said he just knew where to find her. But he didn't understand why she was acting so strange. Hayeon insisted he was imagining things. She said there was no need to create awkward situations. She didn't like making a scene or arguing. Jinhan understood, since he didn't like that either. Why was he so persistent, always trying to support her, even when he didn't know the full story? Hayeon was exhausted, but she had to pull herself together. Jinhan thought that when someone helps you, you should at least thank them. She sincerely thanked him for his help. Jinhan smiled and said it was easy to do, and added that he wouldn't tell someone anything. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder and said they could leave now. He would walk her home. But first, they needed to do something. She didn't understand what he meant or where he was taking her. Jinhan didn't explain. He just said they were going somewhere, and she would be pleasantly surprised. Hayeon was amazed by the interior of the place. She had never been somewhere like this before, and even her fatigue seemed to disappear. It was a luxurious spot. They had come to the hotel's bar, although she had no idea why. Jinhan brought her there because she kept her word and completed what she had to do. So this was her reward. But what if people showed up at the bar? Jinhan assured her that wouldn't happen. It only opened at 6 p.m., and until then, they would be alone. Hayeon thought he had brought her here on purpose. Jinhan wanted to celebrate this happy moment with her. She didn't mind his offer, but it felt too luxurious, and she didn't think she could accept his generosity. Jinhan asked what she wanted to drink. Hayeon didn't know, so she told him to choose something he liked. It didn't matter to her. He asked if it could be alcoholic. Hayeon felt uneasy, but she wasn't the type to get drunk after a breakup. If she didn't want alcohol, he could offer delicious non-alcoholic drinks that were just as good. Hayeon noticed all the drinks in his bar were very expensive, so she decided she would only have one glass. But how could one glass turn into a whole bottle? Jinhan remembered she said she didn't know how to drink. Then she could just enjoy the aroma. They really were nice. Actually, that wasn't true. She could drink. It's just that sometimes she couldn't stop. He didn't understand how that was possible. It seemed like Ji Sung-won's little sister got drunk very easily. Even just dipping chopsticks in soju would do it. She could drink, though he wasn't asking her to get drunk, just to try one glass. Hayeon thought it would be rude to refuse such a persistent offer, so she decided to try a light absinthe. Hayeon asked Jinhan if he liked alcohol, since she had never met anyone who didn't. Jinhan didn't see why she needed to know. Sometimes he allowed himself a glass to relax and take his mind off work. Hayeon thought to herself that maybe this wasn't her place to unwind. She was an adult, though, and allowed to drink. Jinhan admitted to himself again, despite all the time that had passed, some things hadn't changed at all. Hayeon wondered where he had learned all this. Jinhan said he had a talented friend who taught him how to make complex cocktails. Was that the same friend who worked in agriculture on Jeju? When her brother ran a bar, he said Jinhan helped boost his sales. Jinhan absorbed information quickly and memorized drinks one by one, so sometimes he treated himself to different cocktails. As he prepared the drink, he looked completely different, like he was doing something outside his usual role. He asked how she thought he looked. Hayeon didn't know how to say it. It just felt unusual. Jinhan smiled and reminded her he had simply grown up since they last saw each other. To her, he seemed more mature than before. It felt strange, and she didn't understand what she was feeling. Hayeon noticed how well he made the cocktail and thought she should try it. But first, she thanked him for caring and for keeping her company that evening. It looked beautiful, and she couldn't resist taking a sip. Jinhan wanted her opinion. To Hayeon, it tasted amazing. She couldn't understand how he learned it just by watching her brother. After the first sip, she felt much lighter, like the tension melted away. Wasn't it amazing how the green liquor turned white after a while? It reminded her of how quickly people's thoughts could change. Jinhan disagreed. Some things never change. And Hayeon couldn't argue with that. Even though she had pleasant company and Jinhan cared about her, she still felt lonely for some reason. Jinhan noticed she still felt tense, so he behaved carefully, not wanting her to feel uncomfortable. Hayeon had heard green was the color of jealousy, but she wasn't jealous of anyone, and didn't want Jinhan to think she was. She said she was fine, but in reality, she wasn't, and Jinhan understood that perfectly. She realized Jinhan had figured out how deeply she was hurt by the breakup. Maybe that's why he chose absinthe. It matched her emotional state. Today had been the most pleasant day since she turned 20. Her overdue homework was finally done. Unexpectedly, Jinhan gently stroked her hand. It felt like a gesture of tenderness and care. She got flustered. Did she really look that foolish? Like someone who didn't respect herself? But Jinhan said she did well. She should be a little braver, say what she really felt, but without causing a scene. He was surprised by her patience. She had waited so long for the right moment to say everything. Hayeon asked what this was, since his actions were different from before. Jinhan said it was a reward she deserved. Didn't she feel better now? Hayeon remembered hearing while studying abroad that absinthe was Vincent van Gogh's favorite drink. But why did he love it so much? Maybe it was addiction. Maybe he just couldn't stop drinking it. Hayeon looked at Jinhan and noticed how calm he was, so different from Cha Jaeon. She wondered if Van Gogh ever managed to overcome his addiction, or if he drank so much because he was lonely. She had read that absinthism was a side effect of absinthe, related to alcoholism and addiction. But alcohol seemed to ease pain. Maybe that's why, for some people, alcohol tasted good. But instead of getting drunk, Jinhan enjoyed the atmosphere of drinking. That was true. When people share a glass of wine, they talk and learn new things about each other. It helps them understand one another better. It's not easy to find someone you truly enjoy talking to. When Hayeon met someone, she wanted to know everything about them, not out of curiosity, but something deeper. Sometimes she did it out of interest, though, and in the process of meeting people, she felt like part of society. Conversations made her happy. But the older she got, the harder it became to find the right person. And that made her sad. Maybe she had already lost someone who made her feel good, and now all she felt was sadness. But when she drank, her fears and insecurities disappeared. Even if she'd regret it the next day, in that moment, she felt brave. Still, she only drank when she felt sad and lonely. Hayeon felt light. Her body relaxed, her mind empty, as if her problems had vanished. She looked up and noticed the ceiling. It was unfamiliar, and she tried to understand what was going on. The first thing she wondered was where she was. She had never seen a place like this. She tried to get up, but her head felt heavy, the effect of the absinthe. Her head hurt badly, so she lay back down to avoid making it worse. She looked around, trying to figure out where she was and how she got there. It definitely wasn't her home. There were many possibilities, but she couldn't remember anything. It looked like a luxury hotel suite, but she didn't remember how she ended up there, though she suspected Jinhan might have arranged it. Then she stopped herself. Jinhan should be somewhere nearby. But she realized she was alone in the room. Hayeon sat in an empty room, unable to understand what was going on, and she couldn't remember what had happened. She called out for Jinhan Oppa, but he didn't respond. She thought he wasn't there, and honestly, that felt like a relief. But one question kept echoing in her mind. How did she end up here? Had she really blacked out, and Jinhan brought her here himself? She tried to recall everything, step by step, and the first thing she remembered was drinking at the bar with Ryu Jinhan. He asked if she knew a drink called Kir Royale. She knew it well. It almost seemed like she hadn't studied in Paris, but just drank. What was he even talking about? She had dedicated her whole life to studying. Jinhan thought she was ambitious, and he was probably about 5 years older than her brother. He said she was in her 20s, while he was in his 30s. Hayeon noticed he looked really good for his age. What a day. She was drinking with a 34-year-old man. He realized that at some point, his perception of Hayeon had changed. She wasn't the same girl she used to be as a child. She didn't understand how he could be so blunt. What was wrong with having ambition? Jinhan thought that in such a short time, they had already gone through a lot together. Not long ago, things were awkward between them, but now, it was actually nice that they got along. He usually made drinks whenever he invited someone on a date, but for Hayeon, he prepared only the best. Hayeon was already tipsy from the cocktails, so she started seeing things differently. It felt like Jinhan was flirting with her. He looked mature and relaxed, like he had no problems at all and everything in his life was going according to plan. Hayeon finally felt at peace. She let go of everything and just enjoyed the moment. Now she wanted something special. Jinhan said she should be asking her boyfriend for that. It had nothing to do with him. He said he should only act like a gentleman with his own girlfriend, not try to get other girls drunk. Still, he understood, and she could drink what he offered. The cocktails were delicious, and some she tried for the first time. But drinking alone felt boring. Jinhan asked if she wanted him to drink with her. Hayeon thought it was a good idea, but wasn't sure if he could. He wondered if there was any reason to refuse. He wasn't planning to drink alone anyway. He still had to take her home. There was nothing suspicious in his thoughts about her. He just wanted to cheer her up, knowing how hard it is to go through a breakup alone. But if Hayeon wanted company, he would gladly join her, just without overdoing it. Hayeon noticed he poured himself whiskey and wondered if he actually liked it. Jinhan didn't really care for alcohol, so it didn't matter what he drank. If he didn't like whiskey, why had he already had 2 glasses and still showed no signs of it? Jinhan used to drink a lot when he worked. Hayeon wondered if that was his way of coping with stress. He was human too, though for some reason she wasn't always sure about that, which made her curious about his life outside of work. Hayeon thought anyone would get drunk from 2 glasses of cognac, but he seemed used to it. She wondered if people often told him he was perfect. They probably did, but no one is truly perfect. As for him, he never even blushed when he drank. Maybe Jinhan wanted to make a bet who would blush first. Even though he didn't have that weakness, she still wanted to try. Whoever blushed first would have to grant the other's wish. And only then did she realize it might not have been the best idea. But what happened next, she couldn't remember. She even hit her head lightly, trying to force herself to recall. Then she remembered. A very expensive bottle of champagne somehow appeared. She noticed medicine and a note on the bedside table. It was clear Jinhan left them for her, showing his care. She picked up an envelope and couldn't understand what he was or why he left it. She pulled out a sheet of paper, thinking it was a brochure, but it turned out to be a contract. It described a private event on Jeju, with preparations starting in 2 months. The winner would be chosen by voting, and the company would offer special benefits. At first, she didn't understand, but after rereading it, she found it interesting and didn't want to reject it right away. Her head started hurting again, so she decided to take the medicine Jinhan left. The pain was strong, so she thought taking a few pills would help faster. Because of the headache, she couldn't even tell what time it was. It felt like she was lost in time and didn't know where to go. She saw several missed calls from Myunghyun, so she decided to call back, worried something happened at the shop. Myunghyun couldn't reach her and told her to come to Kipi immediately if she was free. It was a terrible day. Hayeon didn't understand why her perfume smelled so strong. It used to feel light and barely noticeable. When she arrived at the shop, she saw Myunghyun sitting outside, with a huge hole in the glass behind her. Hayeon asked what happened. Why was the glass broken? Was it a robbery attempt or someone trying to sabotage their business? Lee Si-ho had drunk too much and tried to break into the shop. She threw a stone to get inside, grabbed her sweater, and started yelling. Myunghyun was asleep when security called about the break-in. She tried to calm Si-ho down, but it only made things worse. She asked if Hayeon knew what Cha Jae-yeol had done. After she left, he started shouting for her, then even hit Si-ho a few times, stopping only when she threatened to call the police. Hayeon looked at Si-ho, who seemed confused and unstable, and wondered if she had something to say. Si-ho asked why Hayeon always acted like she was better than her. She saw no difference between them. If Hayeon took Jae-yeol from her, she would destroy her business. Then came more accusations and threats, completely unfair. Si-ho blamed Hayeon for everything, even though she knew it wasn't her fault. Myunghyun asked Hayeon where she had been and why she didn't answer her calls. Hayeon didn't know what to say, so she just said she had some work. In reality, she had lunch with Jaeho's family. Shiho showed up too, even though everyone thought she was out of her mind. Hayeon admitted that she invited her herself so she could be there too. But things didn't go as planned. Myunghyun was shocked. So Jaehoon really cheated on Hayeon with Si-ho? Si-ho finally felt ashamed, since she knew from the start he was taken and planning to marry her friend. Si-ho tried to justify herself, saying it wasn't easy for her either. But why should she stay in second place? She couldn't stand it. She drank an entire bottle of soju, passed out, then woke up and threw up. The girls joked that now the truth had finally come out. Si-ho calmed down a little, thinking she had sobered up and could act more reasonably. Hayeon noticed she was calmer and suggested they talk peacefully, and Si-ho agreed. But soon, Si-ho started trembling and crying again. She was nervous, still wanting to be with Jae-yeol, even though she knew it was wrong. She started yelling at Hayeon again, asking why she was still involved. It was none of her business anymore. Hayeon didn't demand anything from her. But after everything she did to the shop, did she really feel better now? That mysterious smile of his only showed up when he was sure he would win. But Hayeon had no idea what kind of wish he might have. Their eyes kept meeting, and unlike hers, his gaze was bright and confident. Their looks felt almost tangible, like soft touches across the distance between them. His next cocktail was just as refined as the others, like something made by a bartender at a high-end club. Jinhan wanted to impress her with his skills, and he liked that he could satisfy her taste. Finally, he made her favorite, Kir Royale. and she got to taste the authentic flavor. The strange atmosphere and lingering emotions made it hard to fully give in to their feelings, even though they had been drawn to each other for a while. But in that moment, everything was filled with laughter and fun. The alcohol helped her relax and be herself. If she couldn't remember anything, it probably meant she lost the bet to Jinhan. But why did her head hurt so much if she hadn't drunk that much? Lee Si-ho tried to prove that Hayeon was the one who told her to come to the anniversary, and that she just wanted to make her look like a fool in front of Cha Jaeol's family. Wasn't she ashamed of that? But Hayeon insisted that she was the one who called Si-ho because she wanted to tell everything, saying she had been depressed. Of course that was true. If Hayeon and Jaeol got married, Si-ho would no longer be needed, and the two of them would just laugh at her. Hayeon should have told them everything from the start, because she was the real victim. Hayeon couldn't understand why Si-ho was blaming others now. She brought all these problems on herself and now had to take responsibility. When Hayeon said she broke up with that jerk, Si-ho thought she was lying again. But she said it right in front of her, though after everything, he still ran after Hayeon. Si-ho believed Hayeon said one thing, but reality was completely different. Hayeon repeated that it was over with Jaeod, and since everything was caught on camera, she would have to deal with it now. Si-ho thought they should handle it legally, not based on Hayeon's opinion. Hayeon knew that Si-ho always hated people who had something she never did. She realized she shouldn't tolerate this anymore, agreed with Si-ho, and wanted to end it all. Si-ho said she could quit the shop if that's what Hayeon wanted, but she couldn't just leave empty-handed. After all, she contributed to Kippy's success too. Hayeon was shocked by her audacity. Did she really expect a share? And she noticed that Si-ho hadn't even tried to think this through. They worked together, so it made sense she wanted her share, but clearly, she didn't understand something. Hayeon explained that Kippy's success was the result of her and Myunghyun's work. Maybe Si-ho managed social media, but the company's reputation came from their perfumes. All the expenses were paid by Hayeon. Si-ho joined them without contributing anything significant, and Hayeon was the one paying her salary. Si-ho couldn't accept that. They really thought Kippy succeeded without her, even though she put in effort too. Hayeon insisted her efforts were minimal. The company belonged only to her and Myunghyun. Si-ho had nothing to do with it from the start. Everyone understood Si-ho was in a bad emotional state, so Hayeon decided to support her future plans, but told her not to come to the shop tomorrow. Furious, Si-ho said Hayeon was proud of achieving everything on her own, without her parents' help. But no matter what, she would always be an orphan. She couldn't see anything good in Hayeon's success. Myunghyun couldn't take her arrogance anymore and wanted to hit her. Si-ho didn't understand why things had turned physical. The shop was a mess. Glass scattered everywhere, and the smell of perfume filled the air. Myunghyun told Hayeon to calm down. She wouldn't be able to fix everything right away, since it would take a lot of money. Hayeon suggested closing the shop tomorrow and taking a break. They had the resources for repairs, and she wanted to redesign everything in a Baroque style. If they had known this would happen, they could have accepted the hotel's offer earlier. And honestly, they probably should now. But everyone remembered that Hayeon previously rejected that idea, saying she didn't like it and didn't want to change anything. She explained they already had too much work and didn't want to increase the workload. They were already working full-time and overtime. Thinking about it, Hayeon had worked nonstop for almost a year and a half. Things were going well, so a break wouldn't hurt. In fact, it could be a chance to move forward. Hayeon decided that if Unni believed in it, she would handle it herself and make it work. Myunghyun didn't expect that and thought Hayeon was acting impulsively. When the offer was first made, it didn't seem like the right time, but maybe everything was happening the way it was supposed to. Myunghyun was so happy she hugged Hayeon. She couldn't believe Hayeon had finally come to her senses and agreed. If Sunny was ready, then she was too. If they committed to this, they could definitely take first place. They would need to go to Jeju for 2 months, from April to June, which sounded like a perfect chance to recharge. They would focus on expanding the shop, while Hayeon would travel to Seoul to oversee construction. Their crisis was starting to look like an opportunity. Maybe everything that happened wasn't just a coincidence. Jinhan remembered that Hayeon initially rejected his offer, saying she was too busy. Now she thought they should meet, so he asked to confirm the date and time. A whole week passed after that conversation, but no details were set, so he started to worry. She went to France during a difficult time, so he assumed her tastes developed there and booked a table at a French restaurant. Jinhan wasn't sure if she would like the food, so he hesitated when the waiter asked where to begin. He decided to start with an aperitif, and the waiter suggested a glass of champagne. Jinhan didn't think he'd ever want to drink champagne again, but the waiter understood. Before the meeting, Jinhan felt unusually nervous, something he had never experienced before. Hayeon, however, preferred champagne and didn't even consider refusing it. She asked why he wasn't dating anyone, though at first, Jinhan didn't realize she meant him. She wondered why a man like him didn't have a fiancé. He was handsome, successful, and composed. While she sipped champagne, he thought about how to answer. He didn't know how to explain why he had no real relationships with women. Instead, he asked if she liked the champagne at the restaurant. She thought she was already tipsy after a few sips, but the champagne had no taste. Jinhan smiled and admitted it was just water. Hayeon asked why he did that. Jinhan didn't understand why she wanted an answer if she wouldn't remember it anyway. Jinhan was perfectly fine with his life and never felt the need for a partner or family. Hayeon figured he'd say that. He had everything, so there was nothing to regret. He was talented, from a good family, and attractive. But Hayeon also had good manners, something she hadn't mentioned before. Jinhan thought she might be a little crazy. He said he didn't want to be tied down. Hayeon didn't think much about relationships either, but she was curious why he had broken off 2 engagements. Maybe there were reasons, and if it wasn't a secret, he could tell her. The first woman wanted to study, so he supported her. The second fell in love with someone else. Hayeon thought he was unlucky, though he never saw it that way. Still, it was strange. He had never had a serious relationship, even though 2 marriages never happened. While talking, Jinhan tried to touch her leg under the table, pretending it was accidental. Hayeon took it seriously, but Jinhan was already tired of discussing his personal life. He just wanted her to come back to her senses. He felt like he had finally found his goal, while she insisted she wasn't drunk at all. Jinhan noticed her face flushed first, which meant she lost again. Hayeon loved when he touched her face. It made her feel relaxed and comforted. She miscalculated her limits again and passed out quickly. Jinhan tried to wake her, but she just mumbled softly. He called her, but she didn't respond. Had she really passed out again before they could talk? She was fast asleep, and Jinhan felt disappointed. He had been ready to claim his wish. Jinhan was informed that representatives from Kippy had arrived and were waiting to meet him. He immediately wanted to see them. He had been waiting for this meeting for a long time and was glad they finally agreed to work with him. Honestly, Endless Summer feels like a calm yet emotionally intense story. It's not built on loud drama, but on quiet moments, lingering pauses, and feelings that slowly grow until they become impossible to ignore. The chemistry between the characters is delicate but powerful, and that's exactly what makes it so captivating. You can feel the tension in every scene, especially in the things they don't say out loud. If you enjoy slow burn romance with a gentle atmosphere and deep emotional layers, this story is definitely worth checking out. And it's clear the journey is far from over, so things are only going to get even more intriguing. If you liked this recap, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear your opinion. And of course, the story continues.